Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I wasn't a believer, at least, not in the things that go bump in the woods. I grew up hunting and hiking in the Appalachian foothills, surrounded by people who swapped Bigfoot stories like baseball cards. But I chalked those up to tall tales. Local color to spice up a campfire night. My name is Emma Caldwell. I'm 32, a wildlife biologist by training, passionate about studying elusive creatures, wolves, bears, anything that challenges my skills. Last fall, I accepted a contract to help catalog and monitor wildlife in the Pisgah National Forest, a sprawling and rugged expanse where occasional Bigfoot sightings were whispered, usually dismissed. The forest had been my refuge since my divorce, a place to lose myself in data and nature. But that autumn, something about the forest felt different. On my third night alone at the remote field station near Linville, I heard it for the first time, a deep, rhythmic tapping, like giant knuckles rapping on hollow wood. The sound echoed through the timber, steady and deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The moon was a pale sliver behind fast, moving clouds. The forest was silent, too silent. Then the tapping stopped. For a moment, the world held its breath, and then came the whisper. It wasn't a word or a language I recognized, just a low, breathy murmur, barely audible over the rustling leaves. It felt like the forest was trying to speak or warn. I felt a chill race down my spine. Over the next days, the sounds persisted. At times, I'd catch movement from the corner of my eye, huge shapes slipping behind trees, too large and quick to be any bear or deer. One evening, I found huge footprints pressed into the damp earth, larger than any humans, with 5 broad toes and no claw marks. They led from the creek, past my cabin, and disappeared into the underbrush. I tried to stay calm. I rationalized it as a local prank or misidentified wildlife, but the unease grew. Late one night, while analyzing camera footage, I saw something chilling. A dark figure standing upright near one of the trail cams. It wasn't running or hiding. It just stood and stared. I called it the Watcher. As days passed, the Watcher's visits became more frequent. At times, I swore I could hear it breathing, deep, labored, almost human. I wasn't alone anymore. One morning, I woke to find my supplies disturbed, food torn open, notes scattered, my carefully laid traps destroyed. The Watcher was sending a message. The forest whispered warnings, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to listen. The next morning, the forest seemed indifferent to my growing dread, the sunlight filtering gently through amber leaves. But inside me, unease coiled tighter than ever. I decided to hike the trail where I'd found the giant footprints the night before. If I was going to understand what I was facing, I needed evidence, and the wilderness was my laboratory. The air was crisp, each breath sharp and clean as I traced the prints deeper into the woods. The trail wound through a dense thicket where towering oaks and maples locked their branches above like cathedral arches. The ground was soft from recent rain, preserving every detail of the mysterious footsteps. They were enormous, at least twice the size of my hiking boots. The toe imprints were rounded and blunt, no sign of claws. Something large, something powerful, had walked this way. My heart thumped louder than the steady crunch of my boots. I followed the trail until it ended abruptly at a small clearing. The clearing was strange. Trees stood bent away, as if recoiling from some invisible force, and the air was colder here. Even though the sun shone bright, I knelt to inspect the ground. Something had been dragged. A dark line marred the earth, leading toward a rocky outcrop where moss-covered stones formed a jagged barrier. I felt eyes on me, though no one was there. My skin prickled as a low guttural hum thrummed through the clearing. It was vibrating in my chest, a sound not meant to be heard but felt. I forced myself to stand, shaking off the sensation. That's when I saw it, half hidden behind a thick cedar, watching me. The Watcher, its massive frame was silhouetted against the forest fir, shimmering faintly under the sun's weak rays. Its eyes locked onto mine, deep pools of amber that seemed to pierce through my soul. I couldn't move, frozen in place by a mixture of terror and awe. Then, the Watcher raised a massive hand, not in threat, but in farewell, and with an almost imperceptible shift, it melted back into the shadows. I stumbled backward, heart racing, mind spinning. Why was it here? What did it want? The forest wasn't just home to this creature, it was its domain, and somehow, I had crossed a boundary meant never to be crossed. That night, sleep escaped me. Every creak, every snap of twig was magnified. When I thought I heard the whisper again, I pressed my hands over my ears, begging silence. But the whisper wasn't a voice, it was a warning. The following morning, my nerves were raw, but I was determined. I couldn't just walk away. Not now. I had come too far. I packed my gear and decided to venture farther into the forest, hoping to find answers, or at least some clue about what I had encountered. The trees thickened as I pushed beyond the clearing. The undergrowth was dense, ferns and brambles clawing at my pants with every step. The path was less distinct, broken only by faint animal tracks and the occasional enormous footprint that still seemed to pulse in the earth. The deeper I went, the heavier the atmosphere became, like the forest was watching and waiting. Around midday, I stumbled upon something I never expected, a rudimentary shelter, half collapsed and hidden beneath a massive fallen tree. Nearby were symbols, carved deep asterisk into the bark and stone, angular and jagged. They weren't natural scratches, but deliberate markings, ancient and worn by time. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Then I heard a sound behind me, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. I spun, heart pounding, to see the Watcher again. This time, it wasn't hidden. It stepped into the clearing fully, towering over me, every inch of it covered in dark fur, muscles rippling beneath the surface. Its eyes were tired, ancient, and yet filled with something almost human. I didn't run. I couldn't. The creature lifted its massive hand slowly, revealing a broken branch wrapped in what looked like strips of bark and feathers. It pointed toward the shelter. I hesitated but stepped forward, my mind racing. Inside I found remnants, bones, crude tools, and a tattered journal, half buried in dirt and leaves. I carefully opened it, brushing off decades of dust. The pages were yellowed, filled with shaky handwriting in a language I couldn't understand, interspersed with detailed drawings of a tall, hairy figure, much like the Watcher, alongside human figures, some peaceful, some violent. A sudden realization crashed over me. This was a record of interaction, maybe even coexistence, between humans and this creature, or its kind. But something had shattered that balance. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees, a branch breaking under heavy weight. The Watcher's eyes narrowed. It gave one last look, almost mournful, then vanished into the forest shadows. I sat alone in the clearing, clutching the journal, knowing my life had changed forever. The forest whispered, and now I understood why. I didn't move for hours. The journal sat in my lap, open to a page with a sketch I couldn't stop staring at. A human figure, kneeling, arms outstretched. Before them stood the same towering form with hollow eyes and tree thick limbs. But around them, fire, destruction, and something darker crawling in from the edges of the page. It wasn't just Bigfoot. There was something else. That night, back at the field cabin, I locked every window and door. The forest was no longer a place of wonder. It was a breathing thing, old and bruised, and I'd touched something in it that should have been left alone. I tried contacting the station supervisor via satellite phone. No signal. My radio crackled with static. Even the emergency GPS beacon, always reliable, blinked red. I was completely cut off. I should have panicked. I didn't. Something deeper than fear had taken root. Resignation, maybe. Or a strange clarity. The same kind of mental stillness that settles in when a predator is close and every cell in your body decides not to move. Just after midnight, I woke up sweating, my breath caught in my throat. The whispers were back, but this time, inside the cabin, they curled through the air like fog. Not speech, not sound, just presence. Then the front door creaked open, slowly, not broken, not forced, opened. The air grew heavier. My limbs screamed to move, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. From the doorway stepped a figure, not the watcher. This one was smaller, more human. Its face was half covered in bark, fused with twisted roots like something grown from the earth. Where its eyes should have been, black pits stared at me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't look away. It tilted its head, studying me. Its mouth opened, revealing nothing inside, just darkness, impossibly deep. Then it spoke, but not aloud, not in words. In feeling, you saw him. You woke the memory. The voice cracked through my mind like ice splitting underfoot. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, but the voice kept coming. He was once guardian. Now he is hunted. Now he is prey. As are you. Then it stepped back, turned, and walked into the woods. I crawled to the door, trembling, just in time to see it vanish behind the tree line. I was no longer a visitor. I was part of whatever ancient war was still playing out in the heart of these woods, and it had only just begun. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The cabin was suffocating. No longer a shelter, but a box, too thin to keep whatever was out there from pressing in. I sat with the journal on my lap, flipping through pages I couldn't read, hoping for sense, for answers. But every page brought more dread. One drawing caught my eye, a circle of stones, arranged in a spiral, and at the center, a figure, arms outstretched, eyes glowing. The text beside it was faded, but one word stood out, scrawled in English, offering. The next morning, I hiked back toward the old shelter to see if I'd missed anything. The forest felt warped. Trails that had been clear were now snarled with roots. Landmarks I'd memorized, an unusual birch, a boulder shaped like a tooth, were gone at some point. I realized I was walking in circles. I stopped, turned, and found myself face to face with the Watcher again. Only this time, it wasn't alone. There were 3 others, just shapes at the edge of visibility, massive, breathing, watching, and behind them, the forest, watching too. I lowered my pack and knelt, not out of fear, out of instinct. The Watcher stepped forward and placed something at my feet, a bone, long, yellowed, not animal, human. Then, in one slow movement, it raised a massive arm and pointed east, deeper into the forest. Beyond anywhere I had mapped or explored, it wanted me to go there, and for some reason I couldn't explain. I obeyed. I walked for hours, no compass, no GPS, only the invisible pull of that unspoken direction. By late afternoon, I reached the spiral, a perfect circle of flat stones, spiraling inward to a center marked with a jagged totem, wood, bone, and rusted metal. It hummed, not sound, but vibration, like the thing in the clearing was alive, or awake. I felt drawn toward it. When I stepped Inside the spiral, the air changed, heavier, older, and then the whispers returned, so loud I dropped to my knees. My vision blurred. The trees swam in my periphery, and I saw, not with my eyes, but with something deeper. Visions flashed across my mind, fire in the canopy, men with guns and torches, giant figures dragging their dead into caves, screams, roars, and then silence. Not peace, suppression. I saw the Watcher, young, proud, protecting a boundary, and I saw the figure from my cabin, the bark-faced thing, its mouth a well of nothing, guiding men into forbidden places, breaking something ancient, unleashing something. Whereas that, the forest didn't belong to just one presence. It was a battlefield, and I had walked into the crossfire. I came to sometime after nightfall, lying on the cold earth at the center of the spiral. The forest was so quiet, it felt like the entire world had been sealed shut, but I could hear something faint beneath the stillness, breathing, not mine, something low, steady, massive. I rose to my feet slowly, bones aching, limbs stiff, head pounding like I'd been dropped from the sky. The spiral was glowing faintly now, dim green veins of moss or fungus tracing the stones like nerves, and across from me, just beyond the final curve of the spiral, something waited. It was not the Watcher, it was something else. It stood taller than any of the figures I'd seen. But it didn't move. Didn't breathe the way the others did. Its body was twisted and bark, covered, like a dead tree pulled from the ground and bent into the shape of a man. Its face was blank. No features except a deep vertical split where its mouth should be. It didn't blink, it didn't look at me, and yet I felt its attention like a spotlight on my soul. Then the whispers returned, a hurricane of words not spoken, but injected into my mind. You walked into sacred ground. You broke the quiet. Now you choose. The spiral flared briefly with light. From the trees emerged the Watcher, alone. It walked into the edge of the spiral and stopped. The entity, the bark-faced one, tilted its head in my chest. Something cracked open. I understood. This was a choice, not of life and death, but of allegiance. The Watcher was once protector of this place, of balance, of the boundary between man and forest. But something, the being standing before me, had corrupted the order. It didn't feed on flesh. It fed on breach, on memory, on fear, and now it wanted me to replace the Watcher. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. I looked at the creature, at the Watcher, and I realized the Watcher wasn't hunting me. It was trying to protect me, but its time was ending, and mine was beginning. The spiral blazed around me, a ring of fireless light. Then everything went dark. I woke up at the edge of the trail the next morning. The forest behind me dense and quiet. The spiral was gone, so was the journal. The trail markers had returned, and so had the sound of birds. I limped back to my truck, barely remembering the drive home, but something inside me had changed. The whispers are still with me, especially at night. Sometimes, when I walk in the woods near my home, the trees seem to lean a little closer. They know me now, because I didn't leave that forest alone. Something came back with me, something watching, waiting, and every night before sleep, I see its silhouette outside my window, tall, still, and patient, and I whisper to it, like it once whispered to me. I haven't forgotten. I never believed in monsters. I was the kind of guy who scoffed at campfire tales and chalked up mysterious sounds to raccoons or wind through the trees. But that was before Fur Ridge, before the silence. My name is Derek Foster, and in the summer of 2019, I agreed to spend 2 weeks alone in the Washington backwoods to work on a photography project for my MFA. I wanted to capture untouched wilderness, wildlife in its raw form. My uncle owned a cabin near Fir Ridge, remote, weather-beaten, and isolated. Perfect, I thought. The first few days were uneventful. I hiked, took shots of deer, a lone fox, and some stunning time-lapses of mist rolling down the treetops. But, on the fourth night, I woke up to an unnatural stillness. Not quiet, no. The forest had been quiet before, but this was absence. No chirping, no rustling, just a dead vacuum of sound, like the world held its breath. I remember blinking into the darkness, the only illumination coming from the dying embers in the fireplace. I sat up, listening. Then came the thud, heavy, distant, but distinct. I told myself it was a fallen branch. Fir trees shed limbs often, but my gut clenched. The next morning, I found prints. Not boot tracks. These were massive, wider than my chest, with deep impressions, even in hard, packed soil. I measured one with a ruler from my camera bag, nearly 17 inches long, 5 toes, no claw marks. My heart pounded as I stared at the prints leading toward the edge of the clearing. I didn't sleep the next night. Around 3 a.m., something scraped the side of the cabin, 3 long, dragging sounds, like nails down a chalkboard. When I found the marks at dawn, I dropped my coffee. 3 gouges carved into the cedar siding, higher than I could reach even on TOES. My rational brain kicked in. Maybe a bear, maybe vandalism, but there was no sign of trespass. No tracks except the monstrous ones now circling the cabin. By day 8, I stopped going outside at night. I moved my cot away from the windows. I started hearing breathing. Not my own. It came from beneath the floorboards. Shallow, but deliberate. I hammered the trapdoor shut with chair legs and nails. Day 11, I tried to leave. My uncle's ATV wouldn't start. Engine ripped open, spark plug wires yanked out and tossed. 20 feet away. That night, I saw it, just a silhouette at the edge of the tree line. 9 feet tall, at least. Hunched, arms too long. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, not glowing, but intelligent, calculating. The next 2 nights were torment. It didn't try to get in. It wanted me to see it. It wanted me to know it could come in any time. I was a guest in its forest. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. On the final night, it screamed, a deep throat-shredding roar that seemed to rattle the bones of the earth itself. Then silence again. Absolute, crushing silence. When my uncle came by with gas and supplies on the 14th day, I was curled in a corner, camera in hand. Not a single photograph left on the memory card. All deleted. Shaking, starved, but alive. I've tried therapy. I've tried camping again. But something in me broke on Fir Ridge. Something saw me, and I saw it. It didn't need to kill me. It needed me too, remember, and I do. Every night, especially when the world goes quiet. My name is Rosa Delaney, and I grew up in Northern Oregon, surrounded by legends, trails, and thick, unforgiving woods. My parents owned a small gear shop in Sisters, a mountain town mostly visited by weekend warriors and lost souls looking for peace in nature. I wasn't the former, and I never found the latter. The summer after I turned 23, I took a solo hike on Blackstone Trail, a path closed since the early 90s due to repeated rock slides and a reputation for disappearing hikers, but it wasn't forbidden, just forgotten. Locals whispered about it like it had teeth. I thought it was romantic, in that reckless, young way. I'd take my sketchbook, camp for 2 nights, and draw until my hand cramped. My dad said the last person to go up there had never come back. My mom didn't speak to me the morning I left. The hike up was beautiful, overgrown, but still walkable. I saw signs of wildlife, hoof prints, scat, the occasional snapped branch. By the time I reached an old ranger outpost around dusk, my legs ached and my lungs burned. I set up camp beside the dilapidated shack, cooked a can of chili, and fell asleep to the sound of crickets and wind. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up, every hair on my body standing straight. I thought I heard whispering, but not the kind you can blame on wind or imagination. This was language, not English. Not anything I recognized. I unzipped the tent and stared into the dark. At first, I saw nothing. Then, to my right, just beyond the tree line, something moved. Huge, upright, silent. It passed behind a tree with shocking speed, too fast for its size. I couldn't breathe. The whispers stopped. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe my dream had bled into waking. I zipped the tent and didn't sleep again that night. The next day, my sketches were ruined. Not torn, redrawn. My pencil drawings, sketched with my own hands, had been altered. Figures added in the margins. Long-limbed creatures crouching behind trees. One of them looked directly at the viewer. Its eyes, hollow circles, unblinking. I was done. I packed my gear and began the descent. But the trail had changed. What was a clear path the day before was now strangled by roots and briars. My trail markers, bright orange cloths I tied 2 branches, were gone. All of them. I was walking in circles. I know, because I kept finding the outpost again. 3 times. By late afternoon, I heard the whispers again. Closer, urgent, angry. That night, I didn't camp. I climbed a tree and sat in the crook of 2 branches, gripping my knife. The forest moved beneath me. Something large walked through the underbrush without making a sound. Once, it stopped right beneath my tree and stayed for 10 minutes, breathing. When the sun rose, I found the path again. It hadn't been gone. I ran the last 2 miles. I didn't stop until I saw pavement. When I got back to town, I burned my sketchbook. 3 weeks later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single page from my sketchbook, the one with the creature staring out. Someone had circled its eye, and beneath it, written in block letters, "We see you, Rosa." They say group trips are safer, that the forest is friendlier when you're not alone. But that's only true if everyone in your group is human. My name's Corin Adler. I was 24 when it happened. June 2016. 5 of us had planned a weekend camping trip up near Mount St. Helens. We weren't amateurs. Dan was ex-army. Mira worked in forestry. Paul had done wilderness survival courses. And Rosa, well, Rosa was fearless. We'd all gone to college together, and this trip was meant to be a reunion of sorts. We hiked in on a Friday. Light packs, good spirits. The first day was perfect. Sun filtering through the canopy, the sound of water nearby, laughter echoing in the woods. We found a clearing with a natural spring and set up camp. The first weird thing was minor. Saturday morning, Mira noticed footprints outside her tent. Bare, wide, set prints. Big, but not barefoot human. We joked about Bigfoot. Even took photos for Instagram. #SasquatchHidingDumb. That night, Rosa swore someone was moving outside her tent. 2 legs, she said. Not a bear. It stopped when I called out. Dawn checked, but found nothing. No tracks. No broken twigs, just more jokes and nervous chuckles. Sunday morning, things changed. Paul was gone. His tent looked undisturbed. Sleeping bag still inside, zipped halfway, boots by the flap. No signs of struggle, just gone. We searched for 6 hours. Called his name, blew a whistle. Nothing. We radioed for help using a satellite transponder Dan had brought as backup. The ranger station said they'd send a chopper in the morning. We didn't feel safe staying, but they told us to hold position. That night, I didn't sleep. Nobody did. We sat by the fire, backs to each other, flashlights ready, weapons, a hatchet, a hunting knife, Dan's sidearm, just after midnight. We heard it, footsteps, deliberate, heavy, circling. We called out, "Paul?" No answer. Dan raised his gun. Mira was crying, and then we saw it. Just outside the firelight, a man, or something like one, tall, naked, covered in dirt and what looked like blood, face slack, eyes too far apart, limbs wrong, like someone had stretched him and then crumpled him back down into a man's shape. It stepped forward, and Rosa screamed. The thing grinned, then it spoke. In Paul's voice, "You guys left me." Dan fired 3 times. It vanished into the woods, fast and silent like smoke. We didn't talk after that, just waited for the sun. The chopper came at dawn. We lied, said Paul wandered off, got lost. We said nothing about the man-shaped thing that had worn his voice, like a mask. 2 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, our group photo from the first day, taken by Rosa on her phone. But there were 6 people in it, 5 of us, smiling, and 1 tall figure, standing just inside the tree line, watching. I don't hike anymore. I don't even leave the city. I see it, in my dreams sometimes, still grinning, still waiting to be invited back in. They say, confession is good for the soul. Maybe writing this down will stop the dreams. Maybe it'll stop the noise in my ears. That low rumble like something dragging a tree across stone. My name's Kenneth Rule. I spent 32 years working as a faller in the Idaho Panhandle National Forest. If you're not familiar, that means I cut down trees, big ones. Used to say I could drop a cedar straighter than a plumb line in Jesus' carpentry shop. In '97. I was working a solo contract up on the north slope near Priest River. Hard, too. Access territory. Nobody wanted it. Too many stories. Too many missing tools. Missing men, even. But I had a divorce behind me and debt stacking like timber, so I took it. It started small. Things going missing. Not stolen, removed. I'd come back to the drop site and find my saw 200 yards away. Teeth snapped like someone had twisted it by hand. Trees I hadn't marked would fall overnight, sometimes toward my gear. I thought it was sabotage from locals, or maybe just some drunk hunters screwing with me. Then came the stink, like rot and wet fur and something long dead in the sun. It would drift in before sundown and hang low. You couldn't breathe through it without gagging. One night, I vomited into my boots and just sat there shaking until morning. I started carrying. A sidearm slept with it. Hell, I started sleeping in the truck with the engine running. I kept the lights on too, until the battery died one night. And that's when I saw it. I'd been listening to a cassette, something to drown out the woods. The tape clicked off, and the silence hit like a slap. I looked out through the windshield and saw it standing between 2 pines, huge, hair-like, moss and bark, face half shadow, half human, but the eyes weren't animal. It stared at me, not like prey, like a problem, like I was an issue it hadn't decided how to handle yet. I tried to start the truck. Nothing. Dead. I reached for the gun and dropped it between the seats. When I looked up again, it was closer, 20 feet maybe. Still, watching, I heard it sound like clicking. like bones snapping in a fist, and then it walked away, on two legs, quiet. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't finish the contract. I called in and left a voicemail. I'm done. Pay me for what I did or don't. I'm done. That should be the end of it. But it's not. 3 years ago, I got a manila envelope. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid, a clear photo of me, sitting in the cab of that old truck, eyes wide, mouth open. Someone, or something, had taken it from the tree line, written on the back in blocky, childlike letters, still deciding. I haven't worked a single day since. I still live in Idaho. I still hear dragging noises at night. I still leave out raw meat near the edge of the woods, because maybe if it's fed, it'll stay deciding and not act. Here's the next story in your Bigfoot horror anthology. I wasn't the kind of person who believed in monsters. I'd done over 40 long-distance solo hikes across the US, and I'd always said, if anything was out there, I would have seen it by now. I trusted tracks, weather, maps, and instinct, never stories, never the internet rumors. That changed on my 42nd hike. It was northern Michigan, just below the Upper Peninsula, about 6 miles from the Manistee National Forest. A friend of mine, Caleb, had disappeared in those woods 2 years earlier, vanished without a trace on a day hike. His GPS tracker turned off mid-trail, and nothing was ever found. No gear, no prints, nothing. That bugged me for a long time, so when I had a week off, I decided to hike the same area, not to find him or prove anything, just to retrace his steps and maybe feel like I was closing some invisible door. I had no idea what I was walking into. Day 1 was normal. Thick trees, early autumn breeze, a little fog hugging the earth. I followed the same trail Caleb had taken, marked by his old AllTrails upload. His final coordinates ended near a clearing surrounded by birch and cedar. I camped a half-mile from that spot at 3:17 a.m. Something walked through my camp. I didn't hear it approach, just the sudden sound of twigs breaking, slow, deliberate, like something pacing. Not a deer, not a bear. I stayed silent in my tent, didn't unzip it. My breath hitched when I saw the shadow. It wasn't four-legged, it walked upright, and it was huge. Broad shoulders, long arms, pointed ears, like a Doberman silhouette on steroids. It sniffed the air loudly, moving toward my tent with this low guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. I didn't move. I didn't even blink then. Just as suddenly, it was gone. No sound of retreat. Just nothing. In the morning, I found massive prints circling my tent. 5-toed, but wrong, like a cross between a canine pad and a man's foot. Deep claws. The prints were over 14 inches long. I packed up and left, fast, but the forest didn't let me go. By midday, I was completely off course. The trail markers vanished. My GPS froze. I hiked for 6 hours and found myself in the same clearing 3 separate times. It was like something wanted me to stay. At dusk, I heard it again. This time it didn't pace. It charged. I barely had time to climb a boulder before it burst into view. 9 feet tall, black fur, matted with mud, long jaws with yellow teeth, and intelligent, furious eyes. It stood at the base of the rock, clawing at the stone, huffing and snarling, pacing in frustration. I swear, it looked me dead in the eye and smiled. Then it turned and left, like it was bored, or saving me for later. I stayed on that rock until dawn. When I climbed down, my backpack was gone, but there, in its place, was Caleb's knife. The same blade he always carried on hikes, with his initials scratched into the handle. It hadn't been found in 2 years. Not by search teams, not by his family, but there it was, clean, sharp, sitting neatly on a smooth stone, like a gift. I hiked out without water, without gear, without a map. I walked for 30 miles, barefoot, hallucinating. By the end, when I made it back to town, people thought I was just another cracked hiker. But the park ranger looked pale when I mentioned the prints. He didn't laugh. He just said, "Some places, people go missing for a reason. You were lucky. It doesn't usually let folks walk out." I never went back. But sometimes I hear growling in my sleep. And sometimes, just for a moment, I swear I can smell pine and wet fur in the middle of my apartment, like something found me and decided to wait. People think forest rangers have all the answers, that we know what every print, every scat, every sound in the woods means. But there are places even we don't patrol without backup. Marble Hollow was one of them. I'm Ranger Paul Dwyer. Been with the Forest Service in Montana for 18 years. I've seen a lot. Mountain lions stalking hikers, a man who tried to live off-grid and nearly starved to death, even a freak snowstorm in August. But nothing ever settled in my bones like Marble Hollow. It started with a call in mid-October, 2017. A local hunter, George Hall, went missing near the old quarry trail. Search and rescue found his camp, rifle left behind, food untouched, firewood stacked. It looked like he just stood up and walked into the woods. They brought me in after 3 days of no leads. I'd worked that terrain before. Rocky, dense, and echo-prone. People say, sound gets warped in Marble Hollow. Whispers sound close when they're far. Footsteps bounce oddly. But that's not what got to me. It was the bones. On the second day, I found a clearing I didn't remember being there before. Inside, it was a wide, shallow depression, like something had scraped the earth clean with giant hands. And all across the hollow were piles of bones. Deer, raccoon, rabbit, nothing human, but they were arranged. Rib cages bent outward in circles, femurs stacked like firewood, skulls with moss packed into their eye sockets. I radioed it in. He told me to flag the site and move on. I didn't. I walked the perimeter, trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed the smell. Wet copper and musk. I turned around, and there it was, about 20 yards uphill, partially hidden behind a cedar. Watching, it wasn't just big, it was wrong. Legs too straight, arms too long, covered in tangled hair that looked burned at the ends. Its face was part shadow, part wound. One eye swollen shut, the other locked onto me like I was a puzzle it was almost done solving. I didn't run, I just backed away slowly, whispering my coordinates into the radio with shaking hands. The thing watched me go. By the time backup arrived, the bones were gone. I know what I saw. A week later, George's remains were found in a cave, half a mile west, picked clean, skull missing. The coroner said animal predation, but that's crap. I've seen coyotes eat. This wasn't feeding, it was cleaning. Like something preparing parts for something else. I took a week off, then another. Eventually, I handed in my resignation. You want the truth? I think Marble Hollow isn't a place. It's a den. Something ancient, smart, and patient lives there. Something that builds. Every few years, someone goes missing. Hikers, drifters, a kid once, back in '02. But there's never a pattern. Never enough to make the news. Just bones. Always the bones. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound from that hollow. A low rhythmic clicking, like teeth, or stone tapping against bone. And I always check my backyard, because I think it followed me home. brother Tom was never the same after he came back from the Upper Peninsula. He'd been a different guy before. Funny, wild, the kind of person who'd climb a fire tower just for the view. After that trip, though, he changed. Quiet, jumpy. He wouldn't even walk past the woods near our parents' place anymore. I didn't know the whole story until years later. After I'd moved out and started a family of my own, we were sitting on the porch of our childhood home one summer evening, drinking beers. The sun had just dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows over the edge of the property. Out of nowhere, he asked, "You ever hear of the Dogman?" I nodded, like the Michigan legend, right? Big, hairy thing, walks on two legs. He looked at me dead, on eyes glassy. "It's not a legend." He told me what happened, and the way he spoke, slow, like every word scraped something raw inside him. I'll never forget it. He and two friends, Mike and Jared, had gone camping near Fayette Historic State Park. They found a remote spot, deep in the woods, far from the trails. The first 2 days were normal, hiking, fishing, drinking. But the third night, everything shifted. They heard howling, not coyotes, not wolves, something deeper, angrier. They joked about it, trying to keep things light, but none of them really laughed. Around 3 a.m., Tom said he woke 2 footsteps, slow, heavy, bipedal, not crunching through the woods like a deer, but deliberate, calculated. Something was circling the tent. Mike whispered from the other side, "You hear that?" They stayed still, listening. Then Jared screamed. Tom unzipped the tent and bolted, out with a flashlight, but Jared was gone. His sleeping bag was torn open like a wet paper bag, shredded fabric hanging from a tree branch. They searched until sunrise. No blood, no trail, just deep gouges in the bark and a foul stench that made Tom gag. They finally found Jared, or what was left of him, down by the river. Tom wouldn't describe the body, just said he wished he could forget it. They ran, didn't even pack up, drove the dirt road in silence until they hit a gas station with a payphone. Tom said the sheriff who showed up told them it was a bear attack, but the look in the deputy's eyes, he didn't believe it either. And the way the rangers acted, silent, methodical, collecting everything without questions. It was like they'd done this before. Tom never told Jared's family what really happened. Neither did Mike. After that, Tom couldn't sleep without the lights on. He started locking every door, every window, even in the middle of the day, and he never went back into the woods. That night on the porch, he looked at me with something close to fear and said, "It's still out there. Whatever that thing was, it's not done." I believed him, and now, when the wind howls through the trees behind my house, I sometimes think of Jared, and I check my doors, just in case. I wasn't supposed to be there. The lake was closed to the public after a rock slide blocked the only safe access road. But I was desperate. It was late July, and I'd just lost my job, my apartment, and my boyfriend. 3 hits in 2 weeks. So I drove through the night to Lake Ojala, Montana. My uncle used to take me there when I was a kid. It was a private place, sacred, quiet, but I didn't remember it feeling so empty. My name is Kara Fields, and I'm alive only because I stopped looking for answers and started listening to fear. The first day was uneventful. I parked at the ranger gate, hiked in, and made camp near the north shore. The lake was glassy, untouched, but the deeper the sun sank, the more I noticed the silence. No frogs, no birds, not even the bugs were singing. Just water lapping and wind shifting through dying pine needles. That night, I woke up to splashing. Something large was in the lake, not swimming, waiting. I sat up in my tent, heart hammering. It was pitch black outside, but the moon lit the surface of the water just enough. I saw a silhouette moving near the reeds, tall, sloped shoulders, and arms, dragging along the waterline. That it wasn't fishing, it was searching. I zipped the tent shut and held my breath until morning. When I stepped outside, I found wet footprints, long, wide, deep, leading up the bank from the water, straight to where I'd pitched my tent, and then they just stopped. No, returned Prince. No sign of struggle. It had come up, stood there, watching, then walked back into the lake backward. I packed up to leave, but when I turned on my phone, there was no service, and my GPS had been wiped. Not disabled, wiped. No maps, no logs, just a single image in my camera roll I never took. A photo of me, asleep, in my tent, from outside. I ran the trail backward, hoping to find the logging road. I never did. Instead, I found the cabin. It wasn't on any of the maps. Small, sun-bleached, half collapsed. I went in hoping for a signal. What I found were the journals. 3 notebooks, moldy, warped, filled with pages written by different hands across decades, all describing the same thing, a creature in the lake. Some called it the shoreman. Others said it was just Bigfoot that had adapted, become amphibious. Every few years, someone came here and never left, and those who escaped weren't the same. The last entry was written in 2014. It watches from the shallows. It waits. It learns. Last night it repeated my mother's voice. The night before, it stood behind me while I looked in the mirror. The water is not deep enough to hide it, but it never truly surfaces, only watches. I think I'm the last. I stayed one more night. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted it to come close. It did. I sat by the water at dusk, flashlight off, camera ready, and when it rose from the water, my breath caught in my throat. Its body was slick with algae and moss. One arm was longer than the other. Its head was too narrow. But the worst part was the necklace it wore. A string of objects hanging from its chest, a plastic whistle, a metal key, a faded child's shoe, and a human jawbone. I fled. I don't remember how I found the road or who drove me to the hospital. I told them I got lost, hit my head. They believed me. They always believe the easy story, but I can't sleep near water anymore. I don't shower after dark, and every time I open my phone, I check the camera roll, because that creature knew how to use it once, and I think it remembers me. My name's Daniel Mercer, and I'm a wildlife biologist who's spent more time in the Oregon Cascades than most. I've tracked wolves, documented rare birds, even studied mountain goats for years. But the thing I'm about to tell you isn't in any report. No study backs it up. It's just a secret I carry. In late 2018, I was part of a small crew sent to set up remote cameras along the Ravens Bluff Trail, a steep ridge with dense forest below and sheer cliffs on one side. The place is known for its black bears and elusive cougar sightings, but locals have another reputation for it. Something darker. The first few days were normal. Cameras caught deer, bobcats, the usual. But on day 4, I noticed something strange. On one of the images, a massive shadow lurking near the edge of a cliff, too large and humanoid to be any known animal. That night, I camped near the bluff's edge. I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, circling the perimeter. But every time I flashed my light, nothing was there. Then I found them, dozens of crude, human-shaped figures carved into the bark of trees, with strange symbols scratched around them. The carvings looked fresh. I chalked it up to pranksters until the next morning, when one of my teammates was gone. No trace, no note, just his camera, on the ground, still recording. The footage showed him walking toward the bluff, hearing something, calling his name in a low growl. Then the image went static. We searched for days. No sign. After that, I was alone. One evening, as fog rolled in thick and cold, I heard a guttural breathing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing but trees. Then, the growl again. Louder, closer. I caught a glimpse. Tall, thick with fur. Eyes reflecting dim amber light. It was watching, and it knew I was watching too. I left my equipment behind and fled down the mountain in darkness. It followed the whole way. I don't know what it wanted, or why it took my friend. But now, when I hear a growl or a heavy footstep behind me, I don't look back, because I know the watchers of Raven's Bluff are patient, and someday they'll come for me. We weren't supposed to be out there that night. It was me, my younger brother Tyler, and his best friend Nate. We'd taken the Jeep into the back trails behind our neighborhood in northern Michigan, an old logging road that cut through state forest land. It was late October, the kind of night when the cold sets deep into your joints and everything sounds louder in the dark. Tyler had just gotten back from his first year of college, and we hadn't hung out in months. The plan was simple. Drive out, park, light a small fire, talk, and maybe scare ourselves with some ghost stories. You know, nostalgia. It didn't go that way. The first weird thing was the silence. I don't mean the usual forest quiet. I mean complete and utter stillness. No wind, no rustling, no distant sounds of deer stepping over deadfall, no bugs. We didn't really notice it at first. We were too busy laughing, sipping from the flask Tyler had brought, tossing sticks into the fire. But about 40 minutes in, Nate stood up, turned in a slow circle, and said, "Is it just me, or is it way too quiet?" That's when I noticed it. Tyler shrugged it off. It's late fall. Everything's either asleep or dead. But his voice didn't sound confident. Not really. Then the smell hit us. It came in fast, like someone had opened a sealed bag of rotting meat, just inches from your face. Tyler doubled over, gagging, and Nate stepped away from the fire, shining his flashlight toward the trees. "Don't," I said. I didn't know why I said it, but something in my gut told me we were better off not knowing. We saw it anyway. The light caught something low to the ground at first. Too low. Then it rose. Slowly. It wasn't crawling. It was crouching. And then it stood. Eyeshine. That's what I remember most. Pale yellow. Not reflective like a deer's. Self-lit. Like two sickly flashlights burning from inside its skull. Its face was wrong. Elongated, but flattened. Like a dog's muzzle smashed against a windshield. And its mouth, it hung open just enough to reveal long, uneven fangs that didn't belong in anything on this planet. We froze. All of us. The creature just stared, head slightly cocked, breathing slow, but audible even from that distance. Then it took one step forward. I grabbed Tyler and ran. Nate didn't move at first. He was frozen, I think. But as soon as I reached a Jeep, he was right behind me, screaming. We drove. God, we drove like hell. Hit every pothole and ditch on that old road, praying the suspension wouldn't snap. None of us spoke the whole way home, but we all knew what we saw, and we all thought it was over. But it followed us. That night, I woke up at 3:22 a.m. sharp. No reason. Just snapped awake. My window was open, just a crack, but I swear I could hear breathing from the trees behind my house. Tyler called me the next day, voice shaking. He'd heard claws on his roof. Nate said someone, or something, scratched up his back door, and left muddy prints on his kitchen floor. We tried to laugh it off, act tough, play it cool, but none of us ever went back out to those woods. Nate moved 2 towns over. Tyler started sleeping with a shotgun under his bed, and me. Some nights, I wake up at 3:22 a.m., on the dot, every time. I check the tree line, and every time, I swear, I see those same yellow eyes, watching me, waiting. I never believed in the woods being alive, not in the way some people talk about, with spirits or monsters lurking behind every tree. I thought that was just stories, campfire nonsense to scare kids. But the summer of 1997 changed all that, for me, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened in those mountains. My name is Lucas Harding, and I was 10 years old that summer. My family took a trip to Mount Rainier National Park, a place we'd visited a handful of times before, but that year, things were different. We pitched our tent at a small campground called Silver Creek, a quiet, out of the way spot nestled deep in the forest, far from the main tourist trails. The trees there were massive, ancient firs and cedars that stretched toward the sky, their branches thick enough to blot out the sun even at midday. It was beautiful and intimidating all at once. I was restless from the moment we arrived. My parents set up the tent, unpacked the food, and told me to stay close, but I wanted to explore. I wandered down the creek, skimming stones and watching the sunlight dance on the water. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. On the second day, I noticed something strange while hiking a little way off the trail. There were footprints, enormous footprints, pressed deep into the muddy ground near the water's edge. At first, I thought they might belong to a bear or some other large animal, but these were different. The shape was unmistakably humanoid, with long toes and a wide pad. They were too big to be my own or anyone else's. Curious, I followed them. Upstream, the prints led to a small clearing where the undergrowth was trampled flat. At the center lay a roughly constructed campfire, cold and long abandoned. Scattered around were bits of torn fabric and some broken pieces of what looked like a battered backpack. It gave me a chill. I told my parents when we got back, but they laughed it off, saying maybe someone else had camped there recently. That night, I had nightmares. In them, I was lost in the woods, running through shadowy trees, with heavy footsteps pounding behind me. I woke up gasping, feeling watched even inside the safety of our tent. On the third day, I decided to go back to the clearing. This time, I found fresh prints, similar to the ones I'd seen, but smaller, and they weren't alone. There were also deep gouges scratched into the bark of several trees, crude markings that looked almost like a warning. I felt like I was being followed, though I never saw anything. The forest was silent in a way that unsettled me, as if it was holding its breath. That afternoon, I lost track of time. I wandered farther than before, chasing the prints and the strange markings. Before I knew it, I was off the trail and surrounded by dense trees and brambles. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked unfamiliar. The creek was gone. The trees seemed endless. I realized I was lost. I called for my parents, but my voice was swallowed by the vast forest. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. My legs ached, my throat was dry, and fear started creeping in. Then, I heard it. A low, guttural sound, a growl, close by. I froze. The branches rustled. Something heavy moved in the shadows, just beyond sight. I ran. I don't remember much after that. Just stumbling through the woods, crying, calling for help, the feeling of eyes boring into my back. Eventually, I collapsed near a fallen tree, exhausted and scared. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a voice. Not my parents, but a whisper. soft and urgent, calling my name. When I woke up, I was back at the campsite. My parents were frantic, tears in their eyes. They said I'd been missing for 3 days. I had no memory of where I'd been. I never thought the thing lurking in the pines would change my life forever. I was just a man who wanted one last escape, a chance to find some peace after my world fell apart. But what I found was something else entirely. My name is Avery Clark. I'm 38 now, a former city cop turned wilderness guide. I grew up in Northern California, near the foothills where stories of Bigfoot were part of the local folklore, mostly dismissed as jokes or campfire tales. But I knew the woods better than most. I'd spent years alone in them, tracking wildlife and guiding hunters. In late September 2023, after a messy divorce and a series of bad decisions, I decided to take a trip deep into the Mendocino National Forest. I needed to clear my head, to prove to myself I was still capable of something real. The plan was simple. 2 weeks camping alone, near a place locals called the Hollow, a remote valley rumored to be a hotspot for sightings and strange occurrences. The first few days were quiet. The air was crisp, the sun filtering through the giant pines. I set up camp near a stream, a perfect spot for wildlife and solitude. At night, I'd hear the usual sounds: owls hooting, the rustle of squirrels, distant howls from coyotes. But on day 4, something changed. I woke up before dawn to a deep, low growl. It wasn't like any animal I'd heard before. Too guttural, too human. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The forest was shrouded in fog, the beams slicing through the thick mist. I scanned the trees, but saw nothing. Later, I found huge footprints pressed into the soft mud near the creek. They were enormous, at least 18 inches long, with a wide, rounded shape and 5 distinct toes. No claws. I told myself it was probably a bear or an elk, but the shape didn't match anything I'd seen. That night, the growls returned, closer and more frequent. I didn't sleep. I kept my gun nearby, though I didn't want to believe I'd ever have to use it. The next morning, I discovered something chilling. Scratches on the outside of my tent, long, deep gouges, as if something had tried to tear through the fabric. I checked my camera traps. Several had been knocked down, torn apart. The forest felt alive in a way that was no longer comforting. By day 7, I was on edge. I began hearing footsteps circling the camp at night. Heavy, deliberate. Not animal, but not quite human. It was stalking me. One evening, I caught movement in the shadows. A hulking figure, standing upright, covered in dark fur. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, amber and intelligent. It didn't run. It watched. I froze, heart pounding. The gun useless in my trembling hands. It let out a low roar that echoed through the valley. After that, the nights grew worse. The growls became screams. Long, mournful howls that sounded like pain and rage. The ground trembled beneath me. I felt like I was being hunted. On the 10th day, I woke to find my camp destroyed, my supplies gone, the fire cold. I knew then I wasn't alone. I packed up immediately and tried to hike out, but the forest had changed. Trails I'd marked were gone. Trees I remembered were missing or twisted. I realized I was trapped. For 3 days, I wandered through a maze of towering pines and dense undergrowth. Every night, the screams haunted me. Every day, the footprints followed me. On the 4th night, I found it again, closer this time, just beyond a ridge. It wasn't alone. 2 others stood beside it, equally massive, watching me. I understood then I was being observed, studied. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The largest one stepped forward, its breath steaming in the cold air. 4. A moment, I thought it might attack. Instead, it spoke, a deep, gravelly voice that shook the trees. "Why are you here?" I swallowed hard. "I'm just passing through." The creature studied me, eyes heavy with centuries of knowledge and sorrow. "You're not like the others." "What others?" I whispered. "Those who come and take, those who hunt and kill. We protect this place. The hollow is sacred." I nodded, heart racing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you." The creature's gaze softened. "Leave before the next moon. Or stay, but understand what you risk." I didn't wait. I ran until I broke through the trees and found the trail. Back in town, no one believed me. They laughed at the story of talking Bigfoot guardians, but I carry their warning with me. Every time I return to the woods, I hear their growls in the wind. The hollow remembers, and so do I. I never thought a single decision could unravel everything I believed in. But here I am, sitting in a cold motel room, staring at the flickering neon sign outside, replaying the moments that led me here. My name is Grant Mallory, and this is the story of how the forest whispered my name, and why I can never go back. I grew up on the outskirts of Montana, where the wilderness is both a playground and a prison. My father was a park ranger, a man who knew the forest's every secret. From him, I learned to read animal tracks, to respect the silence, and most importantly, to never underestimate the unknown. Yet, despite all that, I made a mistake. In October 2024, I joined a small group of documentary filmmakers exploring the remote Bob Marshall Wilderness, an area so wild it's often called the Great Divide. We were there to investigate recent reports of strange noises and unexplained sightings. Bigfoot, locals whispered. I was skeptical, but intrigued. The first few days passed in uneventful hikes and campfires. Our team, 3 filmmakers, a sound engineer named Lisa, and me, set up cameras and microphones near old logging trails, hoping to catch something unusual. At night, the forest was alive, with the usual symphony: owls, rustling leaves, distant elk calls. Then came the night of the storm. It started as a whisper of wind but quickly turned into a relentless howl. Trees bent and creaked under the pressure. We huddled in our tents, the rain hammering the canvas like 1,000 tiny fists. Lightning flashed, illuminating the dense forest in strobe bursts. Then, over the roar of the storm, we heard it, a low, guttural growl, deep and resonant, unlike any animal I'd known. Lisa froze, gripping her recorder. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, heart pounding. The sound seemed to circle our camp, moving with impossible speed in silence. Morning brought no relief. The forest was littered with broken branches and fresh, enormous footprints, some more than 18 inches long, leading into the thickest part of the woods. Against better judgment, we decided to follow the trail. For hours, we pushed through the underbrush, guided by the prints and the eerie silence that replaced the usual wildlife sounds. Birds stopped singing, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. By late afternoon, we reached a clearing, an ancient, overgrown logging camp, abandoned for decades. The place was drenched in shadow, the trees pressing close around it. In the center lay a massive stone circle, half buried in moss and dirt. Oddly, the air felt colder here. Lisa snapped photos while I scanned the perimeter. Uneasy, then I saw it, a figure, barely visible behind a thick cedar. Watching us, it was huge, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur that blended with the shadows. Its eyes glinted amber, intelligent and unblinking. We froze. The creature made no move to approach or flee. It simply observed, a silent sentinel, Suddenly, it vanished, disappearing into the forest as if swallowed by the trees themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing whispers, faint but clear, my name carried on the wind. I felt watched, hunted. On the third day, things got worse. Our equipment started malfunctioning. Microphones picking up indecipherable noises, cameras shutting off unexpectedly. Strange symbols appeared scratched into nearby trees, angular markings that didn't match any known language or animal scratches. I tried to rationalize it. Wind, animals, stress, but deep down, I knew something ancient and malevolent was at work. Late that afternoon, while alone, gathering firewood, I caught sight of movement. The figure again, closer this time. It followed me silently, never revealing itself fully, always just beyond the edge of my vision. By nightfall, I was exhausted, paranoid. That's when the screaming started. A piercing, blood-curdling howl ripped through the forest, freezing me in place. It wasn't animal. It was raw anguish, a cry of rage and pain that seemed to shake the very earth. The others heard it too. We packed up and tried to leave immediately, but the forest wasn't done with us. On the way back, the trail disappeared. Paths twisted and changed as if the woods themselves were alive, reshaping to trap us. We walked in circles for hours, the sun sinking behind jagged peaks. When dawn finally broke, we were lost, exhausted, and terrified. That's when I realized something worse than getting lost. The forest had decided we weren't welcome. They always said there was something off about Dagger Lake. Not haunted, not cursed, just wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't shout at you. It settles in slowly, like water seeping through drywall, darkening everything until you finally notice the rot. My name's Kyle Brennan, and I was a seasonal ranger up in the Sawtooth Range in Idaho. The summer of 2022 was supposed to be my last gig before I started grad school. I'd taken the post mostly for the solitude, fire watch, campsite patrol, the occasional lost hiker. Dagger Lake sat deep in the backcountry, 12 miles off the nearest logging road, a mirror, flat body of water surrounded by black pine and steep rock. No cell service, no tourists, just peace, or so I thought. I first hiked up there on June 3rd with supplies for the next 2 weeks. Food, a flare gun, a radio with barely enough reach, and an emergency GPS beacon. The lake looked pristine, water like obsidian, totally still. Not even the usual ring of mosquitoes buzzing over the surface. My assigned shelter was a small A-frame, about 40 yards from the shoreline. Half rotted but functional. The first couple days were uneventful. I hiked perimeter loops, checked on game cams, radioed in weather updates. But on the third night, something changed. It started with a knocking sound. 3 sharp raps. Knock, knock, knock. On a tree just outside the cabin. Not a woodpecker, not wind. Too deliberate. I waited, heart thumping, thinking maybe it was a bear. Then silence, and then a reply. Knock, knock, from deeper in the woods. I stood at the window, flashlight off, listening. Nothing. By morning, I convinced myself it was trees settling or animals playing tricks on me. But it happened again and again. Night after night, the knocking echoed through the pines. Sometimes it came from the shoreline, sometimes from behind the cabin. Always different patterns, always like it was, waiting for an answer. One night, I knocked back. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe boredom. Knock, knock. I waited. 30 seconds passed. Then something responded, not with a knock, but a scream. A long, mournful, inhuman sound that tore through the woods like a freight train through fog. Not a cougar, not a coyote. It had depth to it, like a throat too large for any known animal. The hairs on my arms stood up. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I hiked to the game cams. I wanted to check for bears, elk, anything. But when I opened the SD card on my camera, I found all the footage from the previous 3 nights, corrupted, glitched, static, and black frames. All except one photo, just one. It was taken at 3:17 a.m. According to the times, it showed the edge of the lake, and standing at the water's edge was something 7 or 8 feet tall, shoulders hunched, head low, long arms nearly touching the ground, covered in dark, matted hair. It wasn't facing the camera, but I could see the back of its skull, dome-like and uneven. I wanted to believe it was a bear standing upright, but bears don't walk away on 2 legs. I should have left. Instead, I started writing everything down, documenting if this thing was real. If the legends of Bigfoot had any truth, this was the kind of encounter people didn't walk away from. On day 10, I found tracks near the lake, massive, barefoot prints. I tried measuring one, 18 inches long, 6 toes. The edges were so clean they must have been fresh, but that's not what scared me. It was the prints circling the A-frame, completely surrounding it, and I hadn't heard a thing that night. I locked myself inside with my axe and flare gun. The knocking didn't come. Instead, something breathed against the window, slow, heavy. I didn't look. The breath fogged the glass. Then a shape pressed against it, forehead, nose, and a mouth that didn't seem to open, just stretch. I held my breath. After 30 seconds, it was gone. In the morning, the fog was still on the window, but the ground outside was untouched. No prints, no broken twigs, no trace. I checked the emergency beacon. Dead. The radio, static, and the trees. God. The trees seemed closer. I swear to you, the tree line had moved. 2 more days passed in a haze. I barely slept. I stopped eating. I kept hearing the knocking, sometimes right on the cabin wall, sometimes from the roof. On the final night, the cabin door opened, not broken, just opened. I was on the floor, huddled behind the table, flare, gun in hand. The thing stepped inside, not in a rush, not loud. It ducked under the frame. I saw it in full. It was taller than I thought, closer to 9 feet. Its skin was covered in hair, but the patches on its arms were scarred and torn. Its chest rose and fell slowly. It looked at me, really looked. Its eyes weren't red or glowing. They were sad. It tilted its head. Then it held out its hand. Not in greeting, in offering. It was holding a dead rabbit. Its neck snapped, the body still warm. Then it set the rabbit on the floor and backed out of the cabin. I didn't move for hours. When dawn came, I packed my gear, left the food behind, and hiked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back. 2 miles in, the radio sparked to life. My supervisor's voice came through like nothing had ever gone wrong. "Brennan, your shift's done. You good?" I lied and said I was fine, but I haven't gone near the woods since, and sometimes I dream about Dagger Lake, and the thing standing in my doorway, offering a gift, not a threat, a warning. They always said there was something off about Dagger Lake. Not haunted, not cursed, just wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't shout at you. It settles in slowly, like water seeping through drywall, darkening everything until you finally notice the rot. My name's Kyle Brennan, and I was a seasonal ranger up in the Sawtooth Range in Idaho. The summer of 2022 was supposed to be my last gig before I started grad school. I'd taken the post mostly for the solitude, fire watch, campsite patrol, the occasional lost hiker. Dagger Lake sat deep in the back country, 12 miles off the nearest logging road, a mirror. Flat body of water surrounded by black pine and steep rock. No cell service, no tourists. Just peace. Or so I thought. I first hiked up there on June 3rd with supplies for the next 2 weeks. Food, a flare gun, a radio with barely enough reach, and an emergency GPS beacon. The lake looked pristine, water like obsidian, totally still. Not even the usual ring of mosquitoes buzzing over the surface. My assigned shelter was a small A-frame, about 40 yards from the shoreline, half rotted, but functional. The first couple days were uneventful. I hiked perimeter loops, checked on game cams, radioed in weather updates. But on the third night, something changed. It started with a knocking sound. 3 sharp raps. Knock, 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 on a tree just outside the cabin. Not a woodpecker, not wind. Too deliberate. I waited, heart thumping, thinking maybe it was a bear. Then silence, and then a reply. Knock, knock, from deeper in the woods. I stood at the window, flashlight off, listening. Nothing. By morning, I convinced myself it was trees settling or animals playing tricks on me. But it happened again, and again. Night after night, the knocking echoed through the pines. Sometimes it came from the shoreline, sometimes from behind the cabin. Always different patterns. Always like it was, waiting for an answer. One night, I knocked back. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe boredom. Knock, knock. I waited. 30 seconds passed. Then something responded. Not with a knock, but a scream. A long, mournful, inhuman sound that tore through the woods like a freight train through fog. Not a cougar, not a coyote. It had depth to it, like a throat too large for any known animal. The hairs on my arms stood up. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I hiked to the game cams. I wanted to check for bears, elk, anything. But when I opened the SD card on my camera, I found all the footage from the previous 3 nights corrupted, glitched, static, and black frames. All except one photo. Just one. It was taken at 3:17 a.m., according to the times. It showed the edge of the lake, and standing at the water's edge was something. 7 or 8 feet tall, shoulders hunched, head low, long arms nearly touching the ground, covered in dark, matted hair. It wasn't facing the camera, but I could see the back of its skull, dome-like and uneven. I wanted to believe it was a bear standing upright, but bears don't walk away on 2 legs. I should have left. Instead, I started writing everything down, documenting. If this thing was real, if the legends of Bigfoot had any truth, this was the kind of encounter people didn't walk away from. On day 10, I found tracks near the lake. Massive, barefoot prints. I tried measuring one, 18 inches long, 6 toes. The edges were so clean they must have been fresh. But that's not what scared me. It was the prints circling the A-frame, completely surrounding it, and I hadn't heard a thing. That night, I locked myself inside with my axe and flare gun. The knocking didn't come. Instead, something breathed against the window, slow, heavy. I didn't look. The breath fogged the glass. Then a shape pressed against it, forehead, nose, and a mouth that didn't seem to open, just stretch. I held my breath. After 30 seconds, it was gone. In the morning, the fog was still on the window, but the ground outside was untouched. No prints, no broken twigs, no trace. I checked the emergency beacon, dead dot, the radio, static, and the trees. God, the trees seemed closer. I swear to you, the tree line had moved. 2 more days passed in a haze. I barely slept. I stopped eating. I kept hearing the knocking, sometimes right on the cabin wall, sometimes from the roof. On the final night, the cabin door opened, not broken, just opened. I was on the floor, huddled behind the table, flare, gun in hand. The thing stepped inside, not in a rush, not loud. It ducked under the frame. I saw it in full. It was taller than I thought, closer to 9 feet. Its skin was covered in hair, but the patches on its arms were scarred and torn. Its chest rose and fell slowly. It looked at me, really looked. Its eyes weren't red or glowing, they were sad. It tilted its head, then it held out its hand. Not in greeting, in offering. It was holding a dead rabbit. Its neck snapped. The body's still warm. Then it set the rabbit on the floor and backed out of the cabin. I didn't move for hours. When dawn came, I packed my gear, left the food behind, and hiked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back. 2 miles in, the radio sparked to life. My supervisor's voice came through like nothing had ever gone wrong. "Brennan, your shift's done. You good?" I lied and said I was fine, but I haven't gone near the woods since, and sometimes I dream about Dagger Lake, and the thing standing in my doorway, offering a gift, not a threat, a warning. They always joked that my Uncle Ted talked to plants. As kids, we thought it was funny. The greenhouse keeper, we'd call him. After that old horror movie from the 70s where the gardener kills trespassers with vines, Ted lived alone on the edge of Washington's Olympic Peninsula, near a decaying stretch of forest. No one bothered hiking anymore. Something about the air out there always felt heavier, wetter, older. He built a massive greenhouse behind his property, far too big for a hobbyist. Steel and glass and tarps draped over it like makeshift skins. He'd disappear inside for hours, re-emerging with dirty hands, wild eyes, and vegetables the size of footballs. "The soil out here's different," he'd say. "It's deeper, hungrier." In 2021, after a long silence, we got word he'd passed. Heart failure, they said, but no autopsy was done. No one wanted to drive all the way up that winding 2-lane road to claim the body. So, since I was closest, in between jobs, I went. What I found wasn't just creepy, it was unnatural. Ted's house was swallowed by moss and silence. The windows were fogged from inside. The greenhouse loomed in the back, sagging like a dying lung. The front door was ajar, but nothing looked looted, just abandoned in midlife. Dishes in the sink, a pipe still burning in the ashtray. But it was the smell that hit me first. Not death, not rot, fur, wet, animal musk. Thick, cloying, primal. Something that didn't belong indoors. Ted's body had already been collected, but his journal was still on the table. I flipped through it half, curious. Most of it was rambling. Soil pH, bloom cycles, strange tracks in the garden. Then the entries got weird. March 2nd, 2021. He's back again. Left another gift at the fence post. A rabbit, gutted but clean. I left him carrots in exchange. I think he liked them. He hummed when he took them. March 15th. He's trying to say things now. I think he mimics me. Every time I say greenhouse, he grunts it back. Gurn, house. He watches me through the glass. April 3rd. I saw him in the trees, not hiding anymore, just waiting. He's not alone now. There are more, smaller, younger. They don't approach, but they mimic him. One of them whistled my name. I never taught him that. I stopped reading. It had to be a delusion. Senility, isolation, induced psychosis. But then I heard the knock, knock, knock. Knock from the back of the house. Deliberate, slow. I had a pistol in my bag, but I didn't move toward it. I crept instead to the kitchen window and peeked through the grime. The greenhouse door was swinging open, and inside, through the misted glass, I saw something move. Huge, tall, covered in thick, matted fur, but upright, and holding something, a shovel. I stepped outside, heart hammering, gravel crunching beneath my boots. I called out stupidly, "Hello, Ranger Service." The shape froze, then turned. The face pressed against the glass was unlike anything I'd seen. Not fully ape, not fully human. A heavy brow, wide nose, intelligent eyes. But what stunned me was the expression, recognition, not fear, not aggression, like it knew me. I backed up then. It did something worse than a growl or charge. It smiled and whispered, "Greenhouse, Dave." My name. I ran, not away, but around, toward the greenhouse's side entrance. I had to see what the hell it was. I don't know what I was thinking. Some part of me needed to witness it. But when I got inside, it was gone. The air was humid, thick, with overgrown vines that writhed along the ceiling. There were bones in the soil beds. Dozens. Some animal, some not. In the center was a mound of dirt, freshly dug. Atop it, a necklace. My uncle's, and a small wooden carving of a humanoid figure. Crude, but unmistakable. I heard a sound behind me. Breathing. I turned. Nothing. Just the far wall of the greenhouse, covered in mist and leaves. Then a face appeared behind it, pressed to the outside. Glass. It wasn't the same one. This one was smaller. Its eyes were yellow. It didn't smile. I left that night. Didn't pack. Didn't report the greenhouse. But 2 nights after returning home, I got a voicemail. The caller ID said unknown. The audio was scratchy, filled with static, but a voice came through at the end, childlike, mocking. "Greenhouse, Dave, greenhouse." Then the line went dead. I haven't gone back. The house has since been condemned and sealed off. But I keep my uncle's journal hidden in a locked drawer, because I believe him now. Whatever he found, or whatever found him, wasn't just passing through. He fed it, taught it words, and now it wants to keep talking. If you've never heard of Mira Valley, you're not alone. It's not on most maps anymore, and that's not an accident. It's one of those places that small towns don't talk about, not because of shame, but fear. Ask any local over the age of 50, and you'll get the same response. Don't go up that way. There's nothing there anymore. They're lying. There's something there, and I saw it with my own eyes. My name is Kate Abner. In 2022, I was researching historic mining settlements in northern Montana for a regional history book. I'd already written 3 pieces on ghost towns across Idaho and Wyoming, always staying rooted in facts, census data, architecture, and family records. I prided myself on staying away from superstition, but Mira Valley broke me. I found mention of it in an old county deed registry. Just a few lines about Valley District 7, mining terminated, 1949, settlement evacuated. No explanation. I tracked down more. A crumbling newspaper clipping from 1950 talking about a missing federal crew, and a one-line note about geological instability. That was it. I should have taken the hint. Instead, I went there. The turnoff was just past a road called Cutter's Hollow. Nothing but a gravel trail swallowed by trees. I drove for nearly 40 minutes before the forest opened into a clearing. Wild and overgrown, the remnants of cabins buried beneath brush and moss. Nature had taken the place back, but it hadn't erased it. Not completely. I set up camp beside what used to be a general store. Its frame collapsed. The old signage rotted to near nothing. My plan was to stay 3 days, take photos, collect samples, document structures. The first night was uneventful, almost peaceful. But then came the second. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of splashing, a rhythmic slosh, like something heavy, moving upstream. My tent was only 50 yards from a narrow creek that ran through the valley's edge. At first, I thought it was a deer, then it laughed. Not a full chuckle, just one sharp exhalation, like someone surprised. A human sound, but it was wrong. I froze, still inside the sleeping bag. It laughed again, then it said something, "Come here, girl." The voice sounded like my father. My father had been dead since 2016. I stayed inside the tent until sunrise, knife in hand, blood pounding in my ears. When I finally dared step outside, the morning mist was thick. The creek was calm, undisturbed, but beside it, I found tracks, barefoot, broad, and deep, at least 18 inches long. The toes splayed, more like a gorilla's, but the stride was human, long, straight, purposeful. I told myself I was sleep deprived, delusional. I started packing up, then I found my recorder. It was lying 5 feet from the creek, still running. I hadn't brought it out there. I played it back. Water sounds, then footsteps. Then, my voice stopped whispering. Only, it wasn't me. Not really. It sounded like me. But the words were off. Pretty place, Kate. Pretty girl, pretty skin, the voice used. My name. I didn't wait. I grabbed everything I could and started driving down that gravel road, shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. But the forest shifted. I should have come out near the highway in under an hour. Instead, I drove for 7. No matter which direction I turned, the forest looped. The sun spun too fast, then too slow. My GPS was static. My watch reset itself 3 times. Every so often, I'd pass the same clearing with a rusted bicycle, or the same blackbird, frozen in the same tree, and all the while, I kept hearing my own voice whispering through the static of the car radio, mocking, taunting, repeating the phrase, "Came here, girl." I eventually abandoned the car and walked. No gear, no sense of time, only that I had to keep away from the creek. Its sound echoed through the trees, too loud for its size, like it was chasing me at some point. The trees parted. I collapsed in a roadside ditch as headlights hit my face. A logging truck driver found me 6 miles east of the valley, barefoot and shaken. He thought I'd been in an accident. I didn't argue. Back in civilization, nothing made sense. My car was found weeks later, in pristine condition, parked at a ranger station 60 miles south. My camera had no photos. The recorder had been wiped. Only one file remained, 5 seconds long. It was me, breathing, then whispering, "He's still in the creek." I never went back, but I can't stop seeing him in my dreams. The tall figure at the water's edge, watching, mimicking. Not a ghost, not a man, something that used to be both. It's why Mirror Valley was abandoned, why it doesn't appear on maps, and why, even now, late at night, when I turn on the tap, I sometimes hear him breathing through the water. My name is Levi Gardner. I wasn't always the kind of person who talks about monsters. Before this, I was a wildlife biologist, trained, published, respected. My life was data and observation and slow truths, not shadows and whispers in the dark. But none of that mattered when I went to Hollow Creek. That place changed the rules. It broke the rules, and it broke something in me, too. Hollow Creek isn't on most GPS systems. It's a stretch of wetland and dense pine on the eastern edge of Wyoming's Medicine Bow National Forest, unlogged, undeveloped, the kind of place where fog clings to the ground like a second skin, and the trees are so old they seem to grow without sound. The land belongs to the Crow Nation, or it used to. I only got permission to enter through a colleague whose cousin worked in environmental surveying. The area had shown signs of ecological anomaly, vegetation growing too fast, no predator activity, unusually quiet bird populations, I was called in as a consultant. I should have declined. It started subtly. Little things. I arrived late afternoon, just before dusk, and noticed right away that something felt off. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. The kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. I made camp near the waterline, a wide, slow creek, barely 3 feet deep, winding around a moss-choked bend. There were no frogs, no dragonflies, just the occasional bubble rising through the surface, as if something exhaled from below. First night, I barely slept. Something kept brushing against my tent, soft but deliberate. When I finally got up to look, I saw footprints, bare, massive, pressed deep into the wet mud around my camp, and spaced far apart, suggesting a stride at least 7 feet long. I measured one the next morning, 19 inches. I tried to rationalize. It may be a hoax, maybe a bear standing upright for a few steps. But the shape wasn't bear. It was human, like 5 toes, arched sole, and whatever made those prints had stood just inches from my tent. Watching the second night was worse. I was collecting moss samples late, just past sunset, when I heard something move in the trees across the creek. Not a rustle, a crack, like a branch breaking under weight. I froze, then another crack, closer, followed by a wet noise, like something dragging through mud. I turned on my headlamp, heart pounding. The beam barely penetrated the mist. I called out, "Who's there? This is a research site. Come forward if you're lost." Silence then, behind me, a low, gravel, thick voice. "You don't belong." I turned. No one, just trees, fog, my own. Shallow breath echoing back to me. That night, I dreamed of the creek, of standing in it, neck deep, unable to move, and something behind me. Tall, broad-shouldered, its hand on my head, not pushing, just claiming. I tried to leave the next morning, packed my gear, marked coordinates, started hiking back toward the access road where the truck was parked, but the forest changed. Trails I'd marked were gone, my carved tree signs vanished, the compass spun, and the creek that should have been behind me was ahead again, running wider, deeper, the water redder. I sat down, disoriented, dehydrated, tried the satellite phone. No signal. Even the emergency frequency crackled with nothing but static. Then the laughter came, from the woods, too deep to be human, too close to be imagined. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I huddled inside the tent, weaponless, my knife in hand, listening to the wet breathing just beyond the canvas. At 3:17 a.m., my tent was unzipped from the outside, slowly, deliberately. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stared at the silhouette. It was at least 9 feet tall, wide, impossibly thick arms, hair like moss covering its entire body. Its head nearly touched the canopy. It didn't step in. It just crouched low and whispered in something between a growl and a child's voice. "You carry the sickness." Then it was gone. When I was found, 3 days later, I was 22 miles from where I'd started, clothes torn, feet bleeding. No memory of how I got there. The recovery team said I'd been lucky, that it was probably dehydration or a nervous breakdown, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear it, and they didn't find the notebook I buried in the roots of a tree. My field notes, all still there, including the sketches. I drew it, over and over, each time more detailed, less monstrous, more human, and always with the same eyes. My eyes. VA had tests done, psychological, neurological, clean slate, but I still wake up to the sound of that creek, still feel the mud under my nails, still hear its voice, whispering, "You carry the sickness." Not just to me now, but through me, to others. If you're reading this, you're probably curious. Maybe you want to find Hollow Creek. Let me help you. Don't. It isn't just a place. It's a presence, and once it sees you, it remembers forever. They told me I was found by hikers. Two women, off trail, searching for mushrooms, but they didn't stay. The official report says they radioed for help, then waited with me for 2 hours until rescue arrived. But I don't remember any of that. What I remember is lying beneath a massive cedar, the bark flaking into my mouth, and opening my eyes to a face that wasn't human. Smooth, skinned, expressionless, wrong. And behind it, those same whispers, "You carry the sickness." After Hollow Creek, I spent 10 days in a hospital bed. I was dehydrated, mildly hypothermic, and my vitals spiked any time someone said the word creek. They ran every test imaginable. Mr. Is talks, screens, neurological assessments. Everything came back clean. No drugs in my system, no head trauma, no seizures, no explanation. The official conclusion: psychotic episode induced by stress and isolation. They let me leave on the condition I attend weekly therapy. I agreed, and for a while I tried to believe the diagnosis. I even stopped researching Hollow Creek, but then my dreams changed. They weren't nightmares anymore. They were memories, real ones. I'd see flashes, me standing waist deep in the creek, holding something, a bundle, a wet cloth, something twitching inside it. Then I'd wake up with water in my mouth. I started keeping towels near the bed. Some mornings, my fingernails were packed with soil. Other times my feet were raw, blistered, like I'd walked barefoot for miles. I began keeping track, taking photos, video recordings. I even installed motion-triggered cameras in my apartment. Most of the footage was empty, but once, at 3:12 a.m., the hallway camera captured me walking to the front door, opening it, staring out, then speaking. There was no sound, just lip movement. I had the footage analyzed. What I said was, "Still waters run deep." He's not done. I moved to Denver after that. New apartment, new job, something far away from environmental research. I told myself I was healing, rebuilding, but Hollow Creek doesn't let go. It follows. It started small. The birds near my apartment stopped singing when I walked past. My shower drain began to smell like algae. The water pressure would spike, then die, without reason. Once, the pipes banged in a rhythm. 3 beats, pause. 3 beats, pause. Just like the knock I heard in the woods before the tent was unzipped. I looked it up. Some primates, great apes, communicate this way. Territorial signals. Warnings. One night, I went to a bar with coworkers. I hadn't had a drink in months, but I needed to feel normal. I was halfway through my second beer when someone sat beside me. Tall, pale, long limbs, wore a heavy coat, even though it was warm inside. He never turned to look at me, but he spoke. "You're marked." I laughed it off. Nervous joke. But he kept going. "You gave it a name. That was your mistake." "What name?" I asked. He finally looked at me, but his eyes weren't right. Too reflective, like wet stone. "You called it Bigfoot." His smile was wrong. "Now it knows you." I stumbled out, called a ride, went home, poured bleach down every drain, turned on all the lights, but I could still hear it. From the pipes, from the trees, outside, from the walls, whispering, laughing, repeating the same thing. "You carry the sickness," my therapist said. I was projecting guilt, transferring stress from trauma into symbols. But what kind of symbol leaves muddy footprints on the stairs? What kind of symbol moves the furniture 3 inches to the left overnight? What kind of hallucination texts you your own handwriting from an untraceable number? Because that happened. Last week, one photo, a sketch of the creature, drawn in my old field journal. But I haven't seen that journal since the forest. The caption below the drawing, "Patient Zero." I've started seeing reflections that don't match. Glass panes, bathroom, mirrors, even puddles. My reflection is slower than I am. It smiles when I don't. It blinks late, the worst part. Sometimes, when I stand in front of the mirror long enough, it doesn't reflect me at all. It reflects him. I haven't slept in 2 nights. I've stopped answering the door. My fingernails are cracked from digging at my own skin. But something's changing in me. I can feel it. A heaviness in the chest. A fog in my thoughts. As if something inside me is waking up, stretching, taking root. I look at my hands sometimes and don't recognize them. They're mine, but not quite. Not anymore. This morning, I found a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a single item. My missing field notebook. Every page filled, not by me. Sketches, symbols, maps. Maps. 1. Page repeated again and again. Return to Hollow Creek. I tease, waiting. I don't think I have a choice. It's calling me back. Whatever's inside the forest isn't finished. Not until I bring the sickness home. I left Denver at 4:22 a.m. I didn't pack much. I didn't tell anyone. Just loaded a duffel with a few essentials. Flashlight, notebooks, 2 knives, and the field journal I swore I'd never read again. The pages had changed. Some were damped to the touch, even though I hadn't exposed them to water. Others were filled with entries written in my handwriting, except I never wrote them. Pages documenting behaviors of a subject alpha, its vocalizations, nesting patterns, aggression triggers, a creature not named, just described. 9 feet tall, nocturnal, vocal but not verbal, capable of mimicry. 1 note read: avoid direct eye contact. Prolonged visual engagement seems to trigger mirrored cognition. I didn't understand what that meant. I do now. The drive took 11 hours. It rained the entire time. Not hard. Just enough to soak the edges of everything. Like the world had a fever it couldn't break. The last hour was on logging roads that had long since been abandoned. Trees leaned in too close. The kind of forest that makes you feel like an intruder no matter how gently you walk. Hollow Creek hadn't changed, but I had. I reached the same clearing where I'd camped the first time. The moss was thicker, the creek broader. The air smelled of sulfur and wet rot. It felt like the earth had been sweating. There were no animal sounds, just the creek babbling low and slow, like something old whispering to itself. I didn't set up camp, didn't eat. I just stood there and waited, because I knew it would come at 2:33 a.m. It did, not loud, not dramatic. I looked up from my notebook, and it was just standing there at the edge of the tree line, watching me. Its arms nearly reached its knees, covered in thick black hair matted with moss, wet soil, and something darker. Its chest rose and fell like a bellows, and its eyes, deep-set, glassy, somehow both lifeless and alert, held mine. I didn't move, neither did it. Minutes passed then. Slowly, it took a step forward, another, and I understood what the journal meant. Mirrored cognition, because as I stepped back, it did too. As I blinked, it blinked. I reached for my knife, it opened its mouth, and screamed. It wasn't a sound a throat should make. Low and cavernous, but layered, like something imitating pain. Like a memory of a scream, echoed 100 times, losing its humanity with every repetition. I dropped to my knees. The pain in my skull was white, hot, nosebleed, ears ringing. I don't remember passing out, but I woke up covered in leaves, face down in the mud, several hours later. My watch was gone. So was the journal. There were footprints around me, dozens, maybe more, all barefoot, all large, and mine were among them. I should have run, but I didn't, because something in me, some rotted little part of me, wanted to see more. I followed the prints, through thickets, over stones, slick with moss, past a tree with bark peeled away in long strips, as though something had clawed its way inside it. not out. After a mile, I found the cave. Low entrance. Hard to see unless you were looking for it. I entered. Not because I was brave. Because I was. Called. The cave didn't echo. That was the first thing I noticed, even as I stepped inside. Boots scraping rock, breath uneven. There was no return sound. Like the walls swallowed everything. The second thing. The smell. Damp hair. Fungal rot. Iron. Like old blood that had soaked into wood. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. What I saw made me retch. The walls were lined with bones, not scattered, arranged, rib. Cages inverted like baskets. Skulls cleaned and stacked. Long bones driven into cracks like ornaments. But they weren't all animal. There were human remains. 2. Hikers. Campers. Maybe the surveyors who'd come before me then. I heard it again. The breathing, but not from ahead. Behind me. I turned, knife ready. Nothing, but in the moment I looked away. The bones had changed, rearranged into symbols. Shapes I recognized from the notebook. Sigils, one in particular. A circle with 7 jagged lines cutting through it. Was glowing faintly in the flashlight beam. My name was carved beneath it. Levi. That's when I knew. I hadn't come here to document it. I'd come here to replace someone. The creature wasn't. The monster it was the first victim, and now it needed another. I left the cave hours later, or maybe days. Time had stopped meaning anything. The forest let me go this time. No whispering, no mimicry. But as I reached the tree line, I saw something reflected in the creek's surface. Not my face. It's looking up, smiling. I'm back home. Now. But I don't sleep. I sit in the dark. Door locked. Lights off. I wait. Because I don't know if I left Hollow Creek, or if Hollow Creek came with me.